Professor Akram here, and in this tutorial we are picking up where we left off from our previous tutorial on the cat rig. So we've already got our bone system in, and now we are going to look at adding a skin modifier to our model and getting the bones linked up to the skin. Now that we have our rig in the correct position and everything's kind of set up, we need to link it to our mesh, and that's where skinning comes into play. And skinning is kind of the reverse of what you think. You don't add a skin to a bones, you add the bones to the skin. So I'm going to come in here to my body here in the hierarchy, and I'm going to tell it to unfreeze all so that I can now select my body and my hair. I'm going to start by selecting my main mesh, which is the body, and you'll notice that in the modify tab it already has a skin modifier. We're going to delete this skin modifier just so that we can start from scratch. And I'm going to go into the modify drop down, and again I'm going to go ahead and look for skin. And in the parameters, we're going to go down to bones. So I have a skin, now I need to add some bones. So I'm going to do add. So it's going to open up this dialog that shows me everything in my scene, and I need to select the bones. And I'm going to actually select the human base pelvis here. And from here, I am going to go ahead and do a select all by doing Control C, and this will select not only the children but the children's children as well. And I'm going to hit select, and it's going to bring it all in there just like so. Now that I have all my bones, I can go to my schematic view, and this is going to show me sort of a hierarchy very similar to inverse schematics or linking on how everything is set up. And what I want to do is I want to find the human head, which is right there, that's the bone, and I want to find my hair object. So my hair object is this one right here. And using the link tool, I want to link the hair to the head bone so that the bone, when the bone moves, it's already linked to the mesh, so the head will move, but the hair is a separate object. And instead of doing another second scan and bone system and everything, I can just link this really easily in the schematic view. So I'm going to do link this to the head. So now they will move together as one. And I'm going to close my schematic view from there. And once again, at this point is probably a good time to save a copy of your file. The next thing we're going to look at is editing the envelopes of the skin and adding weights. The first thing that I want to do is I want to turn off the materials so they don't interfere with some of the settings, because it'll go into a full shaded mode when we do this. So I'm going to go to my material editor. Now, if you can't see the materials in the materials editor, what you can do is you can go into materials and get all scene materials, and this will load up. I believe there are 3 materials in my scene, and we want to just quickly turn these off in the viewport. And one of the things that you can do is you can select the material itself, right click on it, and tell it not to shade in the viewport. Another shortcut there is this icon right here. Oops. Is this icon right here that says show shaded material in viewport. You can just click on that and that will turn it off. You know it's off because it takes away the little red striping on the material. So these materials will not show up now in the viewport. Right now our character is in X-ray mode, so we didn't see the materials, but when we go into envelope mode, this will prevent those materials from showing up. So I'm done with my material editor, and I'm going to go into the edit envelopes mode. So what we're seeing now are these 2 capsules, and we have an inner one and an outer one, and what they illustrate is the intensity of how the bone is manipulating the mesh. And here we're looking at the head. So we can see the red is 100%. So anything shaded in red is going to move 100% with the head bone. And blue is going to be the least amount that gets affected by the movement of the head bone. And we can play around with these properties of how intense these objects are actually affect the pull of the mesh. One of the things that we can do, if I scroll down here in my parameters under display, is to play with how this is being presented to us. So right now I've got show all gizmos, I've got colored vertices and colored faces on. So I'm going to turn off the vertices here, and you can see it's just showing me the colored faces. If I uncheck colored faces and turn on vertices, we're getting the same information. We're just seeing the individual pinpoints, the individual vertices of the faces. And from here, we can go ahead and in the parameters, if I scroll up to the top and select vertices, I can then go into my weight properties. So under my weight properties, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to select some of these blue vertices, and I'm going to click this little weight tool option. And the weight tool basically gives me some information regarding the weight of these vertices. And what it shows you is the number just before the bone right here. And this is the percentage that is being controlled by the bone. And 0 is going to be none, and 1 is going to be at 100%. And this is an average depending on which vertice I have selected. So of all vertices, this is how much it is. If I deselect it and select just a single vertice, you can see that it's being affected by the human head by 000 or 0.0001, but the rib cage actually has more manipulation on this particular point of the mesh, and it's percentage based. So again, if I come in and draw a window around several of them, it actually gives me sort of an average rounding up to the nearest amount. But this just gives me an idea of how these items work. And if we needed to change the influence based on the mesh and where the bones were located. We're going to go ahead and close the weight tool without making any changes to this model, because again, it's pretty basic and everything seems to be lining up pretty accurately. With that said, I'm going to go back down to my display settings, and this time I'm going to go ahead and show colored faces, turn off my vertice mode, deselect everything, and I actually want to go ahead and see my edged faces. You'll notice that right now I'm in shaded mode and I can't see the faces of my model. So I'm going to go up to the top here where it says default shaded, and I'm going to tell it to turn on edged faces. And I'm going to go back in the modify tab. I'm still in the skin modifier. I'm going to go back up to the weight properties. And if I hit paint weights, you'll see these blue lines. Now this is our paintbrush where we can paint on the object, but it's super huge. So we can use the Control Shift key to decrease the size of this. However, if for some reason it is massive, we can actually go to the 3 dots over here into the paintbrush settings for the paint weights, and you'll notice that it says our max size is 490, which is huge. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to say 25 is the max size, and close that. And so now you can see that this is much more manageable of a size. And again, if I do Control Shift, I can actually come in and reduce that size of that paintbrush as much as I want. And so now I can just come in here and say that I want the upper chest to move a little bit more with the head. And you can see that makes it more red than blue, meaning that this upper neck portion will move more with the head. And again, this is all to change how you want each bone to affect and manipulate different parts of the body. Now, you might have, for instance, a character that maybe has like a backpack attached, and the backpack is modeled as part of the mesh, and you want it to move with the rib cage, but you don't want any neck part or neck bones to accidentally be pulling on that object. This is where you can kind of manipulate and change how you want the weights of the bones to affect some parts of the mesh. While you want all of the rib cage to move the backpack, you may not want any of the neck necessarily to pull any of it forward. It just depends on the situation. Now again, with the painting of the weights and everything, you can make this asymmetrical, so some objects have more weights than others depending on the side of your object. If your object is symmetrical, then you don't have to do this on both sides. You just mirror the properties just like we've been doing with the bones. So I'm actually going to go ahead and undo this because I don't need any of these settings changed. So I'm going to undo what I've done. So I'm going to go back to my display properties, and I'm going to go ahead and uncheck all of these options and turn off edge facings because that can kind of clutter the screen a little too much. Now, one of the other things that we can do in skin mode is see the symmetry of how the bones are affecting the object. So one of the things that we're going to look at in the parameters here is the mirror mode. Now notice I do have my edit envelopes still selected in the skin modifier, and I've got all my display properties we've turned off. So in the mirror parameters, I'm going to turn mirror mode on, and here you can see the green vertices and the blue vertices, and then a couple of red vertices. And what this means is that for every green there is a blue. So this is the areas of symmetry on the model. There may be red vertices just because of how the model was actually modeled. Some vertices don't match up identical. Maybe there was a little bit of shaping or fudging of the character after the symmetry of the base model was created. But that's what the colors represent. And one of the things that you can do is you can copy the weights of the bones from vertice to vertice, and that's what these settings here are. You can paste the green settings to the blue settings, paste the blue settings to the green settings, copy the green vertices over to the blue, and copy or paste the vertices to the blue. So we have our bone settings as well as our vertice settings, so we can actually mess with the mesh as well as the bones. We're not going to make any of those changes for our model. This is just a parameter that you have the option to make those changes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mirror mode properties, and I am also going to go ahead and turn off the edit envelope. So again, for our basic model, all we really needed to do is add a skin and add the bones that are going to fill in the cavity of that skin. Now that we have our skin modifier and our bones all linked up to our skin, we can start working on animating our character. But that will be in the next tutorial. I hope you found this lesson informative. And don't forget to check out other lessons and tutorials on the channel. So what are you waiting for? Get creative today.